You don't need a giant lot or a massive crew to start developing. Sometimes all it takes is a sliver of land, a little detective work, and the willingness to be scrappy. In this minisode, you'll meet Chase Louderback, a mobile home investor and flipper who decided to build his first house from the ground up. The catch? The lot he had wasn't even considered buildable until he found an obscure zoning workaround and got creative with how to bring the project to life.
I've got kind of starter development project. So I acquired a rental property that had some land with it. And it was a parcel that most people thought couldn't be developed based on the zoning and everything. So I looked into that a little bit more and was able to find a route where we got a modification for the lot in order to change the setbacks. And so what became a lot that you couldn't build on, you now could fit up to a 25-foot wide house. I've always wanted to get into building some and just development. I thought this would be a step into it. And so when I had that lot, I started to get more interested in development. I, at the time, reached out to the town manager. I was like, hey, is there any way like a variance or something I can have here to change the setbacks? Because, 5 lots down, it's a different zoning where I wouldn't have to even worry about this. Like I'd be able to get a 30-foot home in here. And at the time they were like, no, you can't. And then we had basically a changing of the guard. A new town manager came in and I was like, hey, is there anything I can do to develop this lot? And he said, well, actually, there's this obscure code from like 1970 or something where I had to mail all of the neighbors and get their approval for the setbacks I was requesting.
Chase's project started like a lot of ours do. He had a piece of land that nobody believed in. Nobody wanted to redevelop because they didn't think it was possible. But he didn't stop there. He dug into the zoning code, talked to the town manager, waited 3 years, talked to the new town manager, and uncovered an old rule that let him shrink his setbacks just enough to fit a narrow home. These are the kind of zoning wins we talk about all the time in the LRED community. It's like playing a chess match and a poker game all at the same time until you find a way to unlock new opportunities on those overlooked properties.
And so what ended up happening, my original plan was I'm a licensed dealer, so I do a lot of mobile home parks and mobile home investing sort of. It's my background, and I was going to bring in a modular home because I've done a lot of flips and I've never really had to mess with the site work, the foundations, any of that side of things. That was kind of my education was my thought. As long as I broke even, it was okay. So I was planning just to bring a modular home in and learn that side of the business. And then that way I'm not worrying about the framing and all that stuff that could go wrong. But the catch was a lot of modular homes are 28 feet wide, or at least 26 and some odd change. So I had a specific one in mind I wanted to bring in, and it required a 4-foot variance on both sides of the property.
So 8 feet in total, four foot in on both?
Yes. I could also be butchering. It could be 4 foot total. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's one of those two. And so what had happened was I sent a letter out to all the neighbors. One came back and said they didn't want me to be 4 foot closer to the property line. So I offered to meet them out there, and they were just adamant that they would not give me 4 feet closer to the property line. So instead of 15 feet from their property line, I wanted to be 11 feet. And they said, nope, not going to agree to it. Went back to the town manager. He was like, well, we can't approve that. Then you'd have to go through this other process. But what we can allow is, because you own the other property and everybody else has approved it, you can grant that 4 feet on your side. So it allowed me to have basically like a 24-foot wide home, 24 or 25.
So you got half by you being the other property owner. You got half of what you needed.
Yeah, I approved my own request. Yeah.
Well, that works.
Yeah. So yeah, regardless, the lot got built on, and that's kind of the process of how it got started.
And then as far as going to the town manager and just asking, how many years in between town managers was it that it flipped over? Because that's something we see a lot in development, is if you have the patience, you just have to wait for the next round of city council, county commissioners, managers to go through. And sometimes it's just a waiting game. But so how long was it in between that? And then is this something normal that you just go and talk to city officials, or?
To answer the first question, it's probably about 3 years. So it wasn't something that I was like pushing hard. I've got some projects where I follow up with the county like every 3 weeks, trying to get stuff done. This one was one where it kind of came back front of mind. The projects were getting off my plate, and I was like, I'd like to do this again. And at that time, there was a new manager, so I checked with him. I think there was something else that somebody else was talking about, like just again being local, where they were mentioning them working with things a little bit more. So they seemed a little bit more pro development. So yeah, my first meeting with the first one was absolutely, there's nothing you can do. Unfortunately, you can't develop that lot. Second meeting was, well, under this, you can probably get it done. So there's a big change of tone. The process was I had to prove that the lot was formed prior to a certain date. So because the lot was already there prior to a certain date, it could be developed. If I had broken it off, it would not have been possible to build on it.
So it was grandfathered in based on, hey, this lot was here when our code was this.
Correct.
And that's why you were able to say, hey, it was already here. That's why that code applies. So you can be whether they call it a non-conforming grandfathered use, but like basically it all aligned back then when they made it. And now I'm just putting the structure on it.
Yeah, this particular one, I guess it could change depending on where you are, is like I met all the other setbacks. It was just the side ones with this zoning. And because it was this lot was created, I had to go basically down. This is the only other thing that I had to do was I had to go down to the courthouse, research the deed, and show like with proof that this lot was created, I want to say it was before 1950, 60, 70, somewhere in there before code was even a thing. And I was like, okay, so this predates the code. Here's the modification variance thing that I had to apply for. Yeah.
I love that. I love when you find those little wins and you're like, ooh, there is a pathway. We can do this. And then it's just, yeah, playing detective and moving through the pieces.
Yep.
Did you have to do a public hearing or anything, or it was just all administrative once you proved it?
Just all administrative. Yep. So if I wanted to fight that other setback and go with the modular home, then it would have gone to public hearing, and I could also potentially lost the ability to build what I'd been approved.
So let's talk about what just happened here. Chase was this close to giving up on his dream of building on this lot next door, especially after one neighbor denied his setback request. But rather than going through a public hearing and potentially losing, he pivoted. That's the development mindset. Adapt fast, protect your project, mitigate risk, and stay focused on how you can move the project forward. Oh, and that move he made of buying a house that had a lot next to it, that allowed him to go ahead and approve his own request to reduce the required setbacks between the properties. That's creative ownership at work. Okay, so by you granting that setback, then you weren't able to do modular, but you did do stick frame, which is something that you're like, I was trying to avoid on my first one. So how have you navigated it so far? Because I've seen some photos now. I see the framing, so it seems to be working, but how did that process look?
Yeah, so the hardest part for me was like finding an architect that, again, I'm pretty rural, so there was actually a retired architect that took the plan of the modular home I was going to bring, and he modified it for the size. So he changed some stuff around a little bit, but we basically had a house plan already together, and there isn't a builder. I'm actually building it. So how that works is like, every 2 years or whatever, you can do an owner build. So from just flipping houses, I already had the framing contractor relationship. And then basically from like 3 of the trades, they were able to recommend the other trades that I wasn't as familiar with, and go from there. So I just was very thorough in putting together a budget and a spreadsheet for everything that was required down to the permitting cost. And then, just made sure I collected those amounts and put that in my spreadsheet and put a contingency, and that was pretty much it.
Here's where this gets better. Chase decided to build the house himself as an owner builder. That meant pulling his own permits, managing all the trades, and coordinating the entire build without a licensed GC working for him. It's not for everyone, but if you've got strong trade relationships from flipping like Chase did or investing, your state might allow for it. And that path could create a whole new level of control and opportunity for you. Just make sure that your lenders are on board and that your paperwork is buttoned up.
Yeah.
Did anything up to this point throw you for a curveball, or just was it a surprise to go, okay, good lesson learned?
Yeah, so far, I mean, there's been a couple. So I think I've been pretty good at keeping everybody in line with timing. I will say my framing contractor and site contractor have been great because they've kind of handled a lot of things. Like my framing contractor will actually, I've got the quote for all the materials, but he will order it as he needs it. So I don't even have to call them and get that delivered. So like, for example, I have a crane coming tomorrow to put the roof on, and he told me about it. So I didn't have to worry about that. So that helps a lot when you have people like that. When I was building the foundation we had for the crawl space, since it's a block foundation, the way the grading was going to be was kind of tough because it was almost like the access was going to be a little bit below grade, but we couldn't build it up anymore. Like we couldn't build the house up anymore with the way the plan and everything was. So just trying to decide through that, do I go with a smaller access panel, which then has some cons associated with it, with access and everything when you're, potentially trying to put utilities and run everything underneath, or do we just try to put like a little culvert and a well and so that way you can kind of access it with gravel and everything like that and keep the water out. So that was one thing. There's just constantly little things like on our plan, the master bathroom, when my architect reduced it, this was the only thing that was missed was he had the measurement for the full bath width right, but he didn't have the measurement between the wall and the end of the bath frame. So, it's supposed to be like 33 inches. So long story short, we got to figure out how to like get the door into the bathroom in order to also bring out the wall so that the tub is not beyond where the studded wall is. I'm gonna have to call the inspector and make sure. I mean, from everything that I was able to see per code, we could get a 4-inch smaller door in there, but I want to make sure that that's okay first, because if not, we've got to just figure out something else creative that's also not going to make it look weird. But as long as we can get a 4-inch smaller door, we just have to basically shrink the door and move the whole wall out, because it's a wall and like a like linen closet type thing. Yeah. Other than that, so far, that's kind of it. Just making sure all the trades are like looking at the plans, understand what the current plan is. Like another good example today, I met my HVAC guy on site, and he was like, you need to make sure that I'm on this side of the utility closet and not the other side because of where my returns are going to be. So just little things like that where on the plan, since it was a modular home, they didn't have anything with where they were just supposed to be in here. It didn't say where and how they were run, that sort of thing. So yeah.
And how much of your time is this close to where you could go to it every day if you wanted, or is it you go?
Yeah, it's less than 5 minutes from my house.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Was that part of the reason you were like, okay, I feel confident, like it's literally around the corner, first one, let's just see what happens?
Yeah, I was like, it doesn't, for me, with everything else I've got going on, I was like, it doesn't matter if I make money on it or not. But if I'm not going to be able to make money on it, then this probably isn't for me, because the land was free. Like, how's it not going to make sense? And then for the budget and everything, it made sense.
Right, exactly. As far as utilities, was there anything big bringing in new laterals from the street for any water, sewer, power, telecom, gas?
No, I mean, we still have to meet with electrical. So they were supposed to come out last month, but we actually are back today, and they were supposed to meet within the next week there. Water and sewer has already been trenched and into the crawl space, and that really wasn't bad. I think sewer was on the same side of the road, and water, one of these two, basically, I have not paid the tap fees yet, but the town's going to have to connect underneath the road, essentially run one of the lines.
Do they do that? Do you bring it to the property line and then the town will, or will you get okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And do you have a construction loan then?
That was the other hurdle, I guess, is because I'm not licensed, I'm looking at maybe getting my Class A, since I've just done it for so long, but I don't currently have that. So like, here in Virginia, you're able to have, like I said, one generally every 2 years, with the exception of certain trades, like all my mechanical, electrician, and plumber, they have to pull their own permits. Everything else I'm able to have under my permit that I can pull. But it was the lenders that wanted to see, one, do you have a builder that's licensed? And two, do you have like a formal contract and draw schedule?
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to put a list together for the bank that I ended up going with, but there were 2 other lenders that I've used, and they were like, we unfortunately don't have a Class A contractor's license, so we can't do that.
So even though you've had a long track record through flipping, and they know that you're experienced and you know how to do it, they're like, you don't check this box, so sorry.
Correct.
And then the third bank that actually did give that to you, was it just a longer process to prove that, hey, you should give me this loan?
No, that was another one that was a personal relationship. So they were like, yep, we know, you know what you're doing. So just make sure you're getting the lien waivers signed. Let us know when the draws are ready, and you're good to go.
Can you maybe explain the lien waivers and releases and how the draw schedule, just high level, goes, just to give people an idea? Because even if you're not the contractor, as the developer and the one who's getting the construction loan, you still want to get those. Yeah,
so, and it's funny you say that, because talking to a lot of the subs, again, maybe it's just more of a handshake type of town, they were saying that their builders, they generally don't have contracts with. They have never provided COIs. They've like rarely had to deal with lien waivers, because generally with the bank, your GC. So pretend if I'm acting as the GC or the builder here. So if someone else were doing it, their builder would be the one that could be signing the lien waiver saying, yes, XYZ was done and all the subs are paid. So that's all it means at the end of the day is I have to provide this document to my title company saying, here's the work that was done. They were paid X amount. And then it's also notarized with their signature. So the contractor can't say they haven't been paid. The other thing that's important too is we do have certificates of insurance. So I request that from everybody. It's one of the requirements of the builder's risk insurance. And then the draw schedule, I just put that together. You have to have that for the bank. They need to know how many draws you're going to have, how much is each draw. So I have 5 draws. The first one is all the soft and hard costs up to the foundation. The second draw is all of the framing, the dry-in. So we're talking the decks, the roofing, exterior doors, installed windows, shingle roof, etc. The third was the rough-in, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the siding. And then the fourth draw was the paint, any tile, flooring, showers, interior doors, trim, railings, and then the final one was cabinets, vanities, countertops, and then plumbing, electrical fixtures, appliances, landscaping, etc. Just all those finishing touches.
And then for, just out of curiosity, for the things like the vanities or just different fixtures and things like that, and the light fixtures, are you buying that all, or are you having your contractors buy it, or how's that part working?
Okay, yeah, so it depends. My plumber, for example, he's doing all of the materials aside from the fixtures. So I have to get the tubs and surrounds. I have to get the actual faucets and even the kits for like the shower too. So the Delta kits and anything else that's pipe related he's doing. For the electrical, he is providing everything except for like specific light fixtures. So he'll do the recessed lights and he has a plan for that. But if I'm doing anything different than recessed lights, a fan, I have 2 exterior lights, for example, then I have to get that and he'll put it up. And then the mechanicals, everything is just provided by them. So I don't do anything for the mechanical.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. All right. And then the end product, when you're done with this one, will this be a rental? Will you live there? Will you sell it? What's the plan with this one?
Yeah, so plan is to have it to rent, partially also to see if it makes sense for me to do more. So depending on how the margins are, if I'm going to make this like add it to my kit for flipping, there's some land and stuff we're looking at, maybe doing some other types of duplexes or different things. Yeah, depending on how much the margins are, I don't know if it makes sense to build to sell or probably more build to rent if I can. Yeah.
And then you'll just go into a stabilized loan at that point. And
yep.
Does your current construction loan automatically go into a permanent loan?
After a year.
Okay. And then you've already worked out the terms of what that looks like. So it's just a matter of finishing and it goes.
Yeah, I think it's, I could be wrong off the top of my head, but I think it tracks the 5-year plus like 3%, something like that. So yeah.
Awesome. So now that you've gotten this far, you're not done, but you're like well underway. Any regrets so far, or is still like trending well? And
no regrets yet. I think it's been really good. It's been really good experience. And I think that's the benefit of having so much different stuff go on, is when you do have issues that you forget really quick. Yeah. No regrets.
And sometimes it's just even getting through the whole project. And we always do postmortems at the back end to go, okay, here's all the lessons learned. It goes every single time. It doesn't matter if you've done 5 or if you've done hundreds, you're still going to have, depending on your team and depending on the site, different lessons that you pick up. So any advice that you would give to someone who's like, hey, maybe there are the flippers who are curious like you are and going to new construction, any advice you would give, some of the soft skills of patience or being resourceful or something like that?
I think maybe kind of a regret, and some advice would be, I would have wanted to do it sooner, because I've been flipping for over 10 years, and an easy way to do that would be to just build connections with the builder and like partner with the builder. So I was more like, I just want to do it myself. And just the understanding that like, what I like about stick build so far is it's like, you're getting generally better professionals because it's more like they get more of a lump sum right up front. They know what everything's going to be. There's no surprises behind walls. So the flow of the construction so far has been easier. I've had less surprises. We were just chatting about a big surprise I have on a flip, which is a lot of work. So I would say getting in and partnering so that you can do this earlier, but also it's a little bit easier. Keep in mind that it's a little bit easier because the trades are probably paid a little bit more and it's more transparent what the work's going to be. They have less surprises. Yeah. The only other thing would be, if it's your first one, definitely expect to be there a lot, because even though the plans were done, you would think, okay, they just follow the plan. They don't really need me there, but sometimes the plans have a little bit wrong with it. I was actually just there today. There's nothing wrong with the plans where the washer and dryer is going to go, but I realized there's not really much area for a pantry. So now we're modifying that to where it's going to be a stackable washer and dryer, and then I'm going to build a pantry right where the hamper and the washer were originally going to be. So figuring stuff out like that on the fly while if drywall's up, you can still do it, but it's a little later. Really, like you say in your course and stuff, really involve the trades early. So one thing that I was kind of lucky on, the architect was always planning on taking, for example, the ductwork through the attic, but we have barely enough clearance, it looks like. So I had them involved with where the spacing was. I modified the truss plan because of that, but they did not specifically look at how much clearance was there. And so we're looking at potentially having to do that under the crawl space, which means more moisture and damage. So yeah, so just like you said, taking your time and making sure all the trades are involved with looking at the plans.
Last stretch is packed with the kind of learning that only happens when you're in it. From the foundation issues to HVAC clearance surprises to last-minute layout changes, Chase has had to solve problems on site prior to them becoming larger issues. And he's proving that being deeply involved in the details, walking the site, talking to subs, triple-checking the plans, that's making the difference between reactive chaos and thoughtful problem solving that's proactive. Yeah, and it's not that the architect or the engineer suck at their job or they didn't do it right. They're drawing in the plans, they're making it built to code, and then you have your contractors and the subs who know, hey, I do this every day. Here's what we have, or this is the type of system we have now, and they actually made the ducts bigger or blah, blah, blah. So it's when you take all of that knowledge, because everyone works in silos, and what you get to do as the owner and developer is you go, hey, I'm going to bring it all together, and then make changes and tweaks like that. And you have good subs when they're able to kind of help you and troubleshoot and get it right from the beginning versus not saying anything and going, ooh, issues later.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a blessing too. Good people.
Chase didn't wait for the perfect project or the perfect team. He used what he had. A rental property that had some land that could potentially turn into something of value. He had prior experience from past flips and the curiosity to go, maybe I could be a developer someday. That's what we mean when we say development doesn't come from a manual and there is no exact path forward. It comes from paying attention, asking questions, and sometimes just being bold enough to try, knowing that you can pivot and course correct along the way. If you love this minisode and want more boots on the ground stories from real people building in their own backyard, subscribe to the Local Real Estate Developer podcast on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.